where it ends, and where and for how long it rests, before reversing direction. He visualizes the breath as a kind of gem which is being swept along a track, and determines not to let it out of his sight for an instant. In terms of the cradle analogy, the person swinging the cradle must take great care not to let the child fall out. As long as the child is still awake and trying to climb out, the nurse watches it constantly. No matter whether the cradle is at the end of its swing to either side, or at some point in between. There exists always the danger that the child may climb out of the cradle. For this reason, the nurse keeps her eyes constantly fixed on the child. As long as she is doing this, she can be said to see the child fully. Anything that happens to the child will be fully known to her. Similarly, the meditator establishes or fixes his mindfulness on the breathing and sees mentally the entire process without interruption. In this way, he is able to experience uninterruptedly the whole body of breath, beginning, middle, and end. When this method is applied, the breath body is seen clearly, mindfulness is seen clearly, and knowledge, unspecified currency with macrane, is seen clearly as well. Mindfulness is seen as mindfulness, knowledge as knowledge, and the breath body as the breath body. They are not seen as objects of attachment, as being, person, ego, self, soul, me, mine. When this stage has been reached, the meditator can be said to know the breath body to its entirety. He is not subject to any defiling state of mind, such as covetousness and grief, and has constant equanimity, which is the basis for true samadhi. To be developed in the next stage. Stage 4, calming the bodily formation, I shall breathe out, thus he trains himself. Calming the bodily formation, I shall breathe in, thus he trains himself. In this description of the fourth stage, the terms to be examined and understood are bodily formation and calming. They are explained as follows.
The term bodily formation means here the breathing as sustainer or preserver of the primary elements, which are the basis of feeling, and so on. This has been mentioned already and need not be discussed again. However, it should be understood that breathing is very closely coordinated with the rest of the body, being the source of a variety of bodily phenomena such as temperature, movement, flexibility, and so on. Breathing and body are interrelated, influencing each other mutually as to grossness or fineness, restlessness or calmness, and so on. As may be seen, when the body is stiff or restless, the breathing tends to be likewise gross or restless. Conversely, when the breathing is fine and calm, the body tends to become flexible and calm as well. So to control the body is to control the breathing, and conversely, to control the breathing is to control the body. When the breathing is fine, the body is tender and flexible, it is in no way stiff, painful, or restless. This observation, besides revealing the close relationship existing between body and breathing, indicates the value of taking into consideration both body and breathing, training them simultaneously so that they may calm each other mutually. One point needs to be stressed. In this connection, the normal breathing, before beginning to practice, is conventionally termed gross or fine, calm or restless, irrespective of the state of the body. But, regardless of how fine and calm the normal or natural breathing may be, it must, in terms of the practice, be regarded as still gross. It will become truly subtle and calm through the meditation practice, and it is precisely that process that constitutes stage 4. The word calming is to be understood in terms of effect. As mentioned above, the normal or natural breathing is to be reckoned as gross, even though it may not appear so. As soon as it is watched with concentration, it will be seen to be distinctly gross and rough, but then will begin to grow finer.
The more the breathing is scrutinized, the more subtle and calm it will become. In this it resembles the sound of a gong. A gong, when struck, produces a loud sound. When that sound subsides, only long reverberations or vibrations remain. At first, the reverberations are almost as loud as the sound directly produced by the stroke. But then they gradually subside and become fainter and fainter until finally they disappear altogether. Just like the reverberations produced by the gong is the breathing, which also has the characteristic of becoming calmer and calmer. When given the stroke of concentration and scrutiny, unless the gong is struck, no sound arises. Likewise, unless the breathing is scrutinized, examined, silence seems to prevail. No breathing is detected at all. although it is undoubtedly going on automatically. When the meditator does begin examining the breathing, he immediately perceives it and recognizes it as gross. Just as on striking a gong one at once hears a loud or gross sound, once the meditator has begun to scrutinize the breathing, it becomes progressively more and more subtle in proportion to the intensity of his scrutiny. The more minutely and closely he observes and examines the breath, the more calm it becomes. All this is said to point out two important facts. First, if there is no act of scrutinizing or concentrating, the breathing is gross in its natural way, though this grossness is not noticed. Second, when the breathing is scrutinized, it gradually becomes more subtle, but it is not sufficient for it simply to calm down of its own accord in this way. The meditator must deliberately calm it down as far as possible by practicing this fourth stage. And this is what is meant by the term calming in the phrase, calming the bodily formation. Now, how is the bodily formation to be calmed? This can be done in either of two ways, through concentration or through insight.
Here concentration is the process of establishing mindfulness on the breathing, as explained in stage 3. The more the meditator concentrates, the more subtle his breathing becomes. It may even become so fine as to be indiscernible and have to be brought back into focus. Or it may become so fine in the correct way that there arises the counterpart sign or padabhaganamitta. Both of these phenomena result from calming the breath by way of concentration. Concentration of this sort is tranquility meditation, pure and simple. It contrasts with insight meditation, the practice that leads to insight, the direct path to intuitive insight, vipassana, which bypasses the highest stages of tranquility meditation. Put another way, it is a method for the meditator who wishes to practice simultaneously tranquility meditation and insight meditation. To develop insight, the meditator may take as object the breathing or any other phenomenon that goes on throughout the course of the breathing cycle. The finer the phenomenon, the more finely he will discern it, and consequently, the finer his breathing will become. So a person practicing this stage in anapanasati can be said to be calming the bodily formation. We shall now describe how, through the developing of insight, the breathing becomes progressively finer in proportion to the fineness of the object taken for scrutiny. In the beginning, when there is no scrutiny, the breathing is naturally gross. When the nature of the breathing is scrutinized, it immediately tends to become calm. In the texts, the word used is fine, but since fineness of breath presupposes calmness, the word calm is equally appropriate. When the primary elements, earth, water, fire, air, which are connected with the breathing are scrutinized, the breathing becomes still calmer. With the scrutinizing of derived matter, upadhyarupa, that is, the various characteristics and properties derived from and more subtle than the primary elements, the breathing becomes still calmer. When the non-physical, arupa, such as space, consciousness, and so on is scrutinized, the breathing becomes still calmer. When both the physical and the non-physical, rupa-arupa, are scrutinized in terms of their differences, interrelationships, and so on, the breathing becomes more subtle still. When the conditions, pakaya, determining the physical and the non-physical, otherwise mind and matter, namarupa, are scrutinized with such fineness as to penetrate clearly into the mode and conditions of their arising, the breathing becomes even more subtle. And when the impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-selfhood of mind and matter are discerned, the breathing becomes even more subtle and calm. This developing of insight following on concentration, this close scrutiny aimed at intuitive insight, renders the breathing progressively more and more calm. The way of insight is distinctly different from that of straight-out concentration, such as the undiscerning mindfulness on breathing of the earlier stages, which leads only to tranquility, samatha. In passing, an important point in connection with the whole practice must be noted. If the meditator has reached this fourth stage and wishes to carry on through all the 16, he should continue practicing concentration until he attains the highest stage of tranquility meditation, namely the fourth absorption, Katutha jhana. After that he should pass on to practice successively stages 5 to 12. Then, to attain the climax of his practice, he should carry on to practice the last tetrad, stages 13 to 16, which deals with the penetration of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-selfhood. On the other hand, if the meditator does not wish to reach the higher stages of tranquility meditation, first to fourth absorptions, preferring to develop insight immediately and directly, he may do so.